Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the do's and don'ts of training seniors safely. Today's presenter is Martha Swirzinski, and she is a long-standing WITS instructor, and I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Martha.
Thank you, Erin, and welcome everybody to the do's and don'ts of training seniors safely. So this webinar is going to cover, like we just said, some do's and don'ts, but this is actually just a very brief snapshot of a new course by WITS called the Senior Fitness Specialist Certification course. So while I'm going to touch on some items, I'm just going to touch on them briefly, but if you want a more in-depth look at training seniors, make sure that you go to the WITS website and you sign up for this brand new online certification. So just a little bit about myself. I have been a personal trainer for 26 years now, and I've been with WITS since 2009 as an instructor and also helped develop some of their courses. I own my own company, Bratton Design Solutions, where I work with higher education, different universities, and companies on designing courses in exercise science and kinesiology. I have two teenage girls who we're all now stuck at home together, so I apologize. Normally, you don't hear the dogs barking or people, but I don't know what you're going to hear today. I am a rescue dog owner. I have two rescue dogs sitting at my feet right now, and I do volunteer for the rescue agency. So we have quite a full house here at the Swirzinski household these days. So first poll question, I'm going to send it over to Erin for this. How many of you train senior clients right now?
And if everybody will go ahead and pick if you do or do not, and we'll give everybody a few seconds to answer. Also, just want to let everybody know if you have questions for Martha, you can type them into the questions box. We'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So we will try and get through as many as we can in the time that we have. As you know, this will be ending at 12:30, so we will do as many as we can before that time expires. Let's give a couple more seconds here. All right, we have 65% of today's attendees that do train senior clients and 35% that do not. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so quite a bit of you already trained some seniors, and hopefully by the end of this, the rest of you are going to be so excited. Y'all are going to start training senior clients as well. So before we get started, I do want to say, like I said before, this is information that is coming from the new WITS course, and the textbook that they use is called Physical Activity Instruction of Older Adults, and it's by Deborah J. Rose. And all this information, there's actually a slide for this at the very end as well, so don't feel like you have to write it out real quick if you're interested in that textbook. But according to the textbook, they talk about defining seniors or old age or older adults, and they state it sounds simple, but it's actually quite complex. And so they have come up with three main definitions: chronological, biological, and functional. And so chronological age, well, that's easy. It's just the passage of time from birth in years. And so people are often lumped together in a particular age category by their age, and then they're given a label. So maybe it's young old, which is the textbook says is age 65 to 74 years, or maybe you're middle old, and that's 75 to 84. Maybe you fall into old, which is 85 to 99, and then they say the oldest of old would be 100 or more years. But that's just your chronological age. Remember, that's the passage of time from birth in years. Now, biological aging is also known as primary aging, and this refers to a group of processes within the body that eventually lead to loss of adaptability, maybe disease, physical impairments, you might have functional limitations, disability, and then eventual death. Now, functional age has to do with one's functional fitness. And this is functional fitness in comparison with others the same age and gender. For example, if you had an 80-year-old client, she might have the aerobic endurance of a woman in the 60 to 64 age category. And this would be measured by the 6-minute walk, maybe, for the senior fitness test items. And we're going to talk about that assessment later on. So therefore, her functional age relative to aerobic endurance is really, maybe 60 or 64 years of age. So just a little bit to think about when defining seniors. And as we go on through these slides, we're going to talk a lot about, you can't just put everybody into one definition. So here is a slide, and this is the hierarchy of physical function. And researchers Scarduso, Francis, and McCrae back in 2005 actually divided physical function into these 5 levels. And so what you can see here is you might have a senior that falls, somewhere in the 65 age and above, and they might be physically elite. I know I've seen it. I like to do sprint triathlons, and there are individuals way older than I am that are kicking my butt out there on the course. And so they might fall into physically elite. Maybe you have a senior who's physically fit, who does moderate physical activity and work. Then you have physically independent, where they can do some light physical work, and some in these ADLs are activities of daily living, and we'll talk about these a little bit more. Physically frail, maybe they can do some light housekeeping, maybe they can do some ADLs. Then you've got the physically dependent. They really can't do many of your basic activities of daily living. And then, of course, disability. So even though you might have a senior, you'll hear me refer to them as seniors or older adults, they're going to fall somewhere in this hierarchy of physical function. And we need to take all of this into account as we're doing programming for our seniors. I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me go to the next slide. So right here with benefits of physical activity, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I'm telling a bunch of personal trainers that there's benefits to physical activity. We all know this, but I always think it's important just to go back over it, especially if we're talking about a certain population. And so some of the benefits as we get our seniors to be physically active is that it's going to, protect individual from chronic diseases. Their physical benefits. It's going to preserve numerous aspects of physiological functioning, including our cardiovascular function, muscle strength and endurance, balance and flexibility, which are all extremely important. And then, of course, there are a lot of psychological benefits, and this includes emotional well-being. It helps enhance their cognitive function. A lot of studies have shown that seniors who participate in physical activity, and specifically group physical activity, have a higher perceived quality of life. And then, like I said before, tasks of daily life become considerably easier. And this is what we call ADLs, or activities of daily living. And these include things like basic things like walking, for that individual just to be able to get around the home or walk outside, especially walking on different types of floor or pavement or grass. Another ADL is feeding. That's just being able to get the food from a plate into one's mouth. Dressing and grooming, just being able to select their clothes, put them on, and adequately manage their own appearance. Sometimes those buttons are extremely hard. Being able to pull a zipper up in the back can become very difficult if they don't have that flexibility. Another ADL is toileting, which means just basically getting to and from the toilet, being able to get up and down. Bathing and transferring, which means being able to move from one body position to another. And that's like, just going from a bed to a chair, maybe into a wheelchair or a walker, just standing up out of a chair, just anything like that. And so I have an example of a client that I used to train. I mean, this was years ago when I lived up in the DC area and I did in-home training. And I had a woman, she was in her mid-70s. She hired me to come to her apartment, and she had one goal. And that was when she went to her granddaughter's wedding, she wanted to be able to raise her glass and toast her granddaughter during all the toasts. And so I said, okay, great. And so I actually worked with her for a few months. And I mean, her range of motion increased, her strength. We worked on her balance and flexibility. I mean, I had this lady, I mean, she was in great shape to go to this wedding. So she goes to the wedding, has a great weekend. I come back and I'm like, how did it go? And she goes, it was fantastic. I was able to toast my granddaughter. I was able to keep the glass of champagne up the whole time. I was able to dance. And she just went on and on. And I'm so pleased with myself. And then she fired me. I said, what? Why are you firing me? And she goes, well, I reached my goal. So lesson learned was when working with any client, always have them keep establishing new goals. But what was great is not only did we reach her goal of toasting her granddaughter, but all of her ADLs became easier. One of the other things she talked about is she said, I was able to reach into a cabinet in my kitchen that I was never able to use those glasses because they were just out of my reach. And so everything became easier for her, even though she fired me, but oh wow. So benefits of physical activity. Now, when you're working with seniors, and this is really, a lot of this can pertain to almost any population that you work with when it comes to exercise, but you might really particularly hear this from your seniors. Is the first one is, I'm sick, so I shouldn't exercise. I'm not feeling well. Well, many older adults believe that you have to be in tip-top shape to actually exercise. And so what we as instructors can do, we need to dispel this myth by pointing out to role models, maybe in the community, who are regularly active despite having health concerns. A lot of times a senior might just feel comfortable once they get approval from their doctor. And so of course that's something we always want to do in our pre-exercise screening, but to just make sure that we talk to them so that they don't use these myths about being sick or not feeling 100%, or, I have an ache in my hip and I shouldn't exercise. We want to educate them that actually getting moving sometimes will make them feel better. You might hear, I'm too old to start exercising, and is it safe? I don't want to fall. And so what we have to make them realize is that physical activity has been shown to benefit individuals of all ages, and research shows that even people as old as 90 and above can start exercising and see great benefits. So my dad is 85, and he is in amazing shape. He exercises every day. He gets out there and walks and fishes and kayaks. Now he's someone who's always exercised. But on the other side, one of my aunts, she is in her mid 70s and she just decided to start exercising. I can't believe it took her this long to listen to me, but she finally has, and she is just amazed at how great she feels, and told me she should have listened to me a long time ago. But anyway, so we just want to make sure that what we're doing is maybe in our gyms, we have images of older adults to reinforce the notion that age doesn't need to be a barrier to activity. And also to educate them that a lot of time the typical signs of being old are actually associated with inactivity and not their age. So we might want to talk to them about how specific exercises can help them perform their ADLs. A lot of them are fearful of falling and being injured, and so we want to address those worries by discussing the ways we can help them improve their balance, improve their strength and their agility, and all of this is going to help them increase their mobility, and it's actually going to help them reduce their risk for falling. So we need to show them that by exercising, it's actually going to be safer for them as they go about their day. And then we'll talk to them, that we're always there spotting them, and that we are trained professionals that are picking exercises that are safe, environments that are safe for them. Like, that's our job. Maybe they might say to you they're too weak. And once again, we're going to educate them that we are the professional, that we have studied and we know how to pick exercises that can be modified, that we're going to pick exercises and activities that they're going to be able to do and be successful. And so once again, it just really goes back to making sure that we educate our clients on why we're doing what we're doing for them. The whole no pain, no gain, exercise is going to hurt. So a lot of older adults may have learned about physical activity at that time when it was thought that exercise had to be really high intensity and you had to go for hours. in order for it to be beneficial. And now we know that physical activity doesn't have to be exhausting to provide health benefits. And we just need to reinforce to our clients that light to moderate physical activities are appropriate and effective ways to get physical activity into their daily life. And so we're going to show them how we can create a program for them that, you know, it's not no pain, no gain, but they might feel a little muscle soreness, and that's okay. We need to help them understand the difference. And then this is one that I've actually heard before, that they wouldn't come and work out until they got the correct clothing. And I had to say, nope, it's okay. You know, let's talk about what you have. You know, tennis shoes are fine. If you have some other just regular clothing that's not limiting, then we can work out. And so it was when I did in-home training, and you know, it's just they get into their mind excuses, and these are just barriers that we have to help them overcome. Also, talk to your clients about what they can do if, you know, outside of a gym, maybe they're not comfortable coming to the gym. If you can provide them in-home training, then that's a great thing to offer them as well. And then I'm too busy to exercise. That's what everyone uses, right? They're too busy, they can't find the time. And I laugh because my mother-in-law this is the one she always says, and she's retired. I'm like, how can you be too busy? But she says she's just so busy, she just can't do it. So actually talked to her and created a program where when she liked to watch her shows, you know, I had her doing stuff during the commercials. You know, we've all heard about that, but it's really just showing our senior clients that, you know, it can be short bouts of exercise that are still beneficial. And so it's just showing them where during their day they can get the exercise in. And then, of course, exercise is boring. They don't like it. They tried it before years ago and they don't want to do it again. And so a lot of them are going to think it's that, you know, just motion on a treadmill or on an exercise machine. And that's where we come in as personal trainers, and we show them how creative we are, that we can make it enjoyable, that we're going to modify it for them so that it's an individual workout. If we're doing one-on-one, or if it's a class, we can show them lots of different classes. Just and show them that it can be fun to do. So just a few myths about exercising. So pre-exercise screening, and a systematic approach to screening, we all know is essential. It helps us optimize the senior safety during performance testing and exercise, and it helps us to develop effective exercise prescriptions. And so, you know, we screen so that we can learn as much as we can about that person so that we can provide them a safe and effective exercise program, right? It's going to help us identify those health problems. It's going to help us identify any amounts and types of medication used. It's going to help us look at their current level of physical activity and what they're doing now. It's going to help us identify their risk level and determine the need for, if we need any additional screening, and if we need a medical clearance before starting an exercise program. You know, it's going to help us choose the correct type of follow-up fitness and mobility tests. That pre-exercise screening, as you're sitting there talking to them, is going to help us identify their goals. It's going to interest, their barriers, like we just talked about, any motivators that they have. We're going to talk to them about their quality of life, what kind of support they have from family and friends, and their psychological state. So spending that time in pre-exercise screening is just vitally important. And I'll say, you know, it's important not just for our seniors, but for everybody, but really important as we talk about seniors, especially when it comes to medication, because that is going to make a big difference in maybe how we handle them during certain exercises. And so pre-exercise screening includes things like the PAR-Q, the health history questionnaire, and items that we want to make sure that we do with our clients. So some of the physical performance assessments, you know, when we've done the pre-exercise screening, they've been cleared, now we're ready for those performance assessments. This is going to help us identify those who might be at risk for mobility problems and falls. It's also going to help us determine if our program is appropriate for that particular client. During the pre-exercise screening, we may have been thinking they might do really good in this class. And as we do the performance assessments, we might see that maybe we need to gear them towards another class or a different type of program. It's also going to help us motivate our clients because we're going to set those personal behavior goals. Once we get those assessments done, we know what their baseline is going to be, and we can help them set personal behavioral goals. And then it's going to help us select exercises that address a client's specific needs because, like we said before, we're going to see what they can and cannot do. And then it's going to help us give meaningful feedback to clients as we go throughout the program that we've designed. And of course, we're going to follow up those assessments with more assessments and see how they've been doing. So let's talk about two of the assessment tools that the WITS course and the textbook recommend, and they are great tools. These two tools are the Senior Fitness Test and the Fullerton Advanced Balance Scale. And these two assessment tools are designed to measure physical capacity and functional abilities in our seniors. And it's actually based on feedback from hundreds of practitioners in the field that these tests are practical. They're easy to use in terms of training, equipment, space, and time requirements. And they have met the scientific requirements for good reliability and validity. And so the Senior Fitness Test, it's going to measure the underlying physical parameters needed to perform functional tasks of daily living. And the Fullerton Advanced Balance Scale, it measures multiple dimensions of balance in different sensory environments. So here is, this comes straight out of the textbook, and this is table 6.1, and this shows you some of the items, or all of the items of the Senior Fitness Test. And so if you look at the top, you'll see we have a 30-second chair stand. And so its purpose is going to assess lower body strength needed for such tasks as climbing stairs, walking, getting out of a chair, tub, or a car. And so it gives you the protocol, and then it gives you the fitness standards. And then you'll see you have the arm curl, the 6-minute walk, the 2-minute step test, the chair sit and reach, the back scratch, and the 8-foot up and go. And so you'll notice that there aren't any things like box jumps on here, so nothing like crazy. They're all very functional. And so it just, like I said before, measures the underlying physical parameters needed to perform those ADLs. And it really utilizes those functional tasks. Like I said, just standing up from a chair, and just all of these things, these items, once you do them, you'll notice that your participants really kind of find them practical and relevant, and they're motivating because this is where you give that feedback. Maybe you're doing the sit and reach and they see that, you know, they really don't have that lower back flexibility. And so then we can talk to them and make goals based on that, and then show them how we can help improve that lower body flexibility. So this is just the Senior Fitness Test. And this is the Fullerton Advanced Balance Scale. And this was developed to measure multiple dimensions of balance, like we said, but this is in different sensory environments. And it was developed for use with actually higher functioning older adults. And it's comprised of these 10 test items, and they're scored using a 0 to 4 scale, with the highest score being possible in this test is 40 points. So you'll see items, you know, that include standing on foam with eyes closed, walking with the head turned. You might step up and over an obstacle, and you have a 2-footed jump, for instance. So this scale is really easy to use in a community setting. And this, they state, is also really a good scale to use because it's predictive of risks for falls. And so you can see the 10 different test item, and then it tells you, you know, it tells you the dimension of balance being measured. So both of these are two really good assessment tools to take a look at and use. Now, the second poll question is just wondering how many of you have ever used one of these assessment tools? So Erin, are you there?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm here. All right, so you can answer yes or no, and we'll give everybody a few seconds to do it. There was a question, and with choosing, you should be able to click the yes or the no. Um, but the polls are just interactive. So if you can't answer them, not a huge deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Just wondering.
The sorry, there was a question. Sorry, I was trying to get through everybody saying they couldn't answer the polls. How many points did you say was the highest?
Oh, for the Fullerton, the highest
Yeah.
you can get is 40 points.
Oh, let's close and share. For those that were able to answer,
Oh, wow.
60% have and 40% haven't. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it
Okay,
back over
great.
to you.
That's almost exactly like the other one, like 65% are training seniors and 60% have used it. So that's fantastic. Great. Well, glad to hear that. Um, oh, sorry if that picture looks a little fuzzy. So let's just move on to a couple of do's and don'ts when it comes to incorporating different exercises into your time with seniors. And so let's take a look at balance and mobility. This is extremely important that we make sure that we allocate at least 10 to 15 minutes during every class or personal training session for balance and mobility activities. We talked before about ADLs, risk of falling, and so as we work with our senior clients, this is just extremely important to be able to work on this. So the course, the textbook suggests that you really try to look at making sure you get 10 to 15 minutes during every class. And these can be incorporated into your warm up or your cool down sections. Maybe you add it to your core component of a class, or you can have it stand alone. So it's really up to you how you bring these exercises into your time with the seniors. Another way for more advanced clients to incorporate balance activities is to perform certain strength and flexibility exercises in a balanced, challenging environment. However, I always have to say, make sure that you exercise extreme precaution when doing this. And realize as I'm saying seniors, it sort of falls on that scale of very high functioning seniors, and then of course your very low functioning seniors. And sometimes you might have a class that has a mix. And so we need to make sure that you are paying attention and aware of everyone in your classes. So the primary goal when presenting those balance and mobility activities to your seniors is to challenge them, but not to exceed their capabilities by too much. You want to have those balance and mobility tasks that can be performed in a variety of practice environments that they're going to simulate what they encounter in everyday life. So for instance, if you were doing one-on-one with a client, maybe you would have them do some of these activities, not always on the hard floor, maybe not too advanced might be the BOSU trainer, but something in between might be some carpet or something else, a mat, which gives them just a little, gets them off balance just by a little bit, just working on that balance and mobility. And then the warm up. So we all know that warming up is really good. It gets the muscles warm, it brings the heart rate up, gets the blood flowing to the extremities. But when you're working with seniors, this is also a really good time for you as the instructor to take a look and assess their physical, mental, and emotional health status of your clients, because many of them experience changes in blood pressure, their energy levels, joint pain, and mobility, and even focus from one day to the next. So once again, when you do that pre-exercise screening with them, you'll know what medications they're on, but it's just really good as they're doing the warm-up to sort of talk to them, that talk test, make sure that their heart rate's not getting too high, and you just want to see where they are physically, mentally, and emotionally during that day. It's also a great time to talk to them about any joint pain that they're experiencing and find out if they're having any issues. Once again, just remember older adults are taking medications that are intended to control heart rate and blood pressure. So you have to be careful because their heart and breathing rates may not increase in a similar fashion to some of your younger clients. A really nice strategy if you're doing a class as opposed to one-on-one is to use the circle formation during the warm-up. It really allows you to watch closely for any signs of overexertion, and you can talk to each of the clients, ask them how they're doing, that talk test. They should be able to respond to you without gasping for air. This is where you can talk to them and ask them, like, how does the room temperature feel, things like that, because the environment is really important as well, that you create a really good environment. And one factor is the temperature. So if the room temperature seems warmer than normal, you really want to closely monitor your seniors for signs of overexertion or flushed face, sorry, or unusually rapid breathing. So what they suggest is a good room temperature really ranges between 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's considered safe according to the American College of Sports Medicine from 2012. And once again, that's between 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That is considered safe. Because we know that an exercise that's too hot for our clients, especially those with high blood pressure, just puts them at a greater risk. And so just always watch, paying attention to if they're flushed or how they're feeling talking to them. And so then you can just modify either the air conditioning, or maybe you have to modify the class in and of itself and the intensity. A couple more tips for creating a good environment is you want to make sure that, especially if you have clients who are not used to exercising, that during the warm-up, and actually the whole course, but the warm-up, you want to provide a lot of opportunities for feelings of accomplishment and success in movement. I think we know that if someone doesn't feel successful or feels embarrassed or out of place, they're not likely to come back. And so we want to make sure that we're structuring the warm-up so that they're very successful. We also want to try to create a non-competitive and safe environment where participants are encouraged to work at their own level. So what research has shown, and the textbook will tell you, is that the senior population isn't really into competition. And I'll be mentioning this again, but we want to create that non-competitive and safe environment where they're encouraged to work at their own level. And so that means, just as an instructor, that you're going to demonstrate lots of variations if your class has lots of different clients in there that are at different levels. And even it's important, like we said before, that the seniors can vary from day to day, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. So always be prepared to offer them modifications if needed. When we talk about flexibility and function, activities of daily living are really affected by flexibility. And some of the ones that are most affected require reaching overhead. Kind of talk to you about my client who was really excited she could reach up into her kitchen cabinet finally and get some of those glasses down. Another ADL that's affected by flexibility is getting into and out of a car, especially a low car. Even reaching into low cabinets because they have to bend down is difficult, or bending down for anything to pick up off the floor, stepping onto or down from a high step or curb. These are all ADLs that are affected by some flexibility. Another ADL, like I think I spoke about, is the inability to put on clothing with zippers or fasteners in the back because they have that limited shoulder internal rotation. And so also a reduction in shoulder elevation can restrict their ability to put on sweatshirts or t-shirts or anything that requires that amount of shoulder elevation. Inadequate knee flexion coupled with limited trunk flexibility can actually make it more difficult, if not impossible, for older adults to put on shoes and socks. And so, as the number of functional limitations as the flexibility increases, then you're going to see more functional limitations. And so then that independence becomes more and more compromised. And then with limited flexibility, they're actually more likely to I can't say my S's today, I'm sorry, to sustain a muscle injury. And so it's really important that we spend time working on flexibility with our seniors, that this is part of our time spent with them, that we just don't show them a few flexibility exercises and tell them to do it on their own. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of my clients don't always do the flexibility on their own, so I make sure that it's a part of our time together. So general precautions, like any other program component, the flexibility exercises you're going to select have to be appropriate for your clients, and we want to make sure that they are performing them correctly. And so you want to have special precautions followed when you pick flexibility exercises for clients who have certain medical conditions, maybe osteoporosis, rheumatoid arthritis, because static and dynamic stretching techniques can improve flexibility, and they should be included, but you just want to make sure that they're following all the guidelines. You know, for example, you want to make sure, and I'm getting ahead of myself, I'll talk about the guidelines in a second, but you just want to make sure that they're going at their own pace, you're really listening to them, you're asking them how they feel, and you really just that feedback from them, I can't stress it enough, is really important to get them to talk to you. And you just want to make sure that you have that conversation over and over and over again, because a client who has poor balance, if they are trying to do a flexibility, say a standing hamstring, maybe they don't have the balance. So you can perform those exercises in a seated position or with additional support of a chair or a wall. So during the flexibility, it doesn't necessarily have to be when we're working on our balance. You know your client, you'll have to make those calls. And so flexibility exercise guidelines, these are to follow, and these come straight out of the textbook that if you were taking the course, you would read this, and it says, select flexibility exercises on the basis of which joints have obvious range limitations and which ones are stiff, right? You want to make sure that you're going to emphasize that good body alignment, always talking to them about that. You want to perform the dynamic stretches during the warm-up, because that's going to facilitate warming up the body and muscles, and you're not going to perform static stretches until the body is at its warmest, right? So static stretches, you only want to perform once the body has been warmed up, but you can perform those dynamic stretches during the warm-up. Always have your clients move slowly into a static stretch. Remind your client that you're going to stretch to the point of gentle tension, but not pain. You don't jerk or bounce or force a stretch. And then you want to hold that stretch for anywhere from 10 to 90 seconds. Make sure, because I know y'all have seen this if you train, to tell them to breathe. That so many people want to hold their breath during a stretch, but you want to inhale before the start of a stretch, exhale during the stretch, and breathe evenly while holding the stretch at its end position. So breathe, remind them over and over again to breathe. So just a little bit about flexibility. Like I said before, there are lots of different modifications depending on where your senior client falls in their fitness range. And so modify, modify, and modify where needed. Always making sure that they feel successful. So just a couple points on aerobic endurance training. ACSM states for frailer, older participants that you really want to have a preparatory period of strength and balance training before beginning aerobic training. And this is so that you minimize injuries and falls. If they don't have some basic balance and core strength and ability to move without falling or tripping, then you don't want to begin a difficult aerobics class with them. And so this just goes back to that pre-screening and performance assessment so that you know where best to place them and in which class they would fit and be the most successful. And the recommendation is always to start low and go slow. And you're going to want to progress by first increasing the time for aerobic endurance and then maybe increasing the intensity. We want to make sure, and once again, this is ACSM's recommendation for frailer, older participants. So when you're talking about teaching a class, and this is not just one-on-one, but if you have a class of seniors, a couple of tips for demonstration is, well, this is really the most commonly used strategy for communicating how to perform a new movement skill is to, well, demonstrate the skill to the class. But when it comes to your seniors, you want to make sure that all of the participants can observe the demonstration from a location that allows them to see the most critical parts of the skill performed. Everyone should be able to see the skill performed. So that may mean that you have to come down from the front of the stage or do a circle lineup so that everyone can see. So I will tell you a little bit about myself. I recently, in the last year, had to get glasses for distance, but I don't wear contacts, and I'm not going to wear them to go work out. So if I'm in the back of a class, I probably can't see the instructor so well now, and I'm probably too vain to go up, and say I need glasses for working out. So you just have to make sure that wherever your clients are, they can see you well enough. Of course, you're going to demonstrate the correct way to perform the skill many, many times over and over again. And you want to provide feedback, but you want to be careful that you don't provide a lot of verbal feedback during the demonstration. While we know it's necessary, you're going to use verbal cues before the demonstration to direct the participants to the key features of that skill. And the reason you don't want to do a lot is because, for example, my dad, he's 85, he's in great shape, but he can't hear very well at all. So he actually reads lips. So if you are talking and demonstrating, he's going to look at one or the other and not both. So make sure that for verbal feedback or verbal cues, you might be using most of them before, then you're demonstrating. You just want to make sure that everybody's picking up on what they need to do. So verbal instructions, this is, you want to just make sure that when you're giving those verbal instructions, that you're focusing them on the critical feature of whatever that movement skill is. And it's particularly important when teaching your seniors that the number of instructions provided does not exceed their limited capacity to attend to or retain the information provided. So it's just really important. What we know through research is that they really only can listen and retain so much. So try to make sure that your verbal instructions are clear and to the point. Some other things are that you want to make sure you're not using a lot of jargon, that maybe there might be a term that you use all the time, but a new person has come in and they don't know it. So try to make sure that you're using words that are meaningful to everyone in your class. Okay. So once again, we just want to make sure that your instructions are simple, that they're to the point, that they're very focused on the movement that you're doing. Maybe you want to create an image for when you're talking about a certain movement skill. Strong visual images really help the learner associate with that skill. For example, let's say you were doing a swimming class or you were talking about a side stroke. You might say something like, reach above your head with your lower arm and you pick an apple off the tree and put it in your other hand. So they can visualize that as they're going through that side stroke. So visualization is a wonderful tool to use. So verbal cues, right? This is just a short word or a single word, even a concise phrase that is going to help your client really remember what it is you're saying. So it directs people's attention to that specific skill. You might say, look at this step if you're doing step stuff. If you're doing a aerobics class, you might say step kicks or knee lifts. So once again, just make those verbal cues and verbal instructions short, concise, and to the point. Your challenge really as an instructor is just to provide that instruction for your seniors, but more than likely you're going to have a very diverse class when it comes to your seniors. And don't forget that they're going to vary both in physical and cognitive abilities as well as the stage of learning. So just be prepared to adapt your suggestions or your verbal cues to different people. You might find, and as you're going through the class, that you're saying something and no one's really picking it up. So I always say have plan A, B, C, D, and E ready. As I teach different classes, you can see their face, and that's why it's really good to really pay attention and take a look at your clients' faces. That tells you a lot if they're understanding what you're saying. And then exercise selection, just a couple of points here, and this would be during your aerobics class. You know, you really don't want to have turns of more than 90 degrees. And even a 90-degree turn, depending on the client, you may need to alter that to a 3 or even a 5-point turn. You want to be careful of any lateral movements of one leg across the other, like the grapevine. So we know that some controlled lateral movement is great because it helps master that stepping to regain balance that our seniors need. But that's a lot different than traveling across the room at a quick pace or with a group of people. So what you might do for your younger population doesn't always necessarily carry over to your seniors. And once again, that just really depends on their abilities. And then of course you want to be careful that you don't have any sudden changes of step, speed, direction, or level. You're offering lots of modifications with your exercises, and just being careful, making sure that there aren't going to be any falls. So a few more tips or guidelines to follow when you're giving instruction. You know, we discussed demonstrations and making sure that they can see you, but they also need to hear you. And so they have to hear and understand. And so you need to project your voice louder and actually lower. There's research that shows they will hear your voice if it's lower. So you also want to make sure your lips can be seen and that your lips move normally. And you might have to adjust the volume of music. So you need to ask your participants, can they hear you? Can they understand you? You're going to want to use body language. And you really want that larger than life hand signals for ample warning of any directional changes. And this also helps improve clarity and safety for those who might have hearing or vision problems. If you're using like circuit cards or anything like that, you want to make sure any letters and numbers are in thick, large, plain font. You just want to make sure that you're using photographs of older adults so that they can relate. And then you want to make sure that you're going to perform all levels of an exercise initially. You'll show them the different modifications, but make sure that from time to time you're going to perform that least challenging option yourself. Don't always do the most difficult because it actually validates the others and supports them to work at their own level when they see you also working at that level. I stated before you want to avoid phrases that provoke any competitiveness, such as, let's see how quickly you can get from here to there. Most seniors aren't into competitiveness, although I laugh. I'm very competitive, and I hope I stay that way all the way through my 90s. Once again, I talked about make sure that you're really paying attention to each one of your seniors. You're looking at their facial expressions, their body language, so that you can analyze their movement needs. And as you're paying attention to them, this is where you're going to provide not just a correction, but maybe a tailored solution. And you want to be discreet about it, and you want to handle it effectively. You're going to emphasize body awareness skills. If you have a senior coming into a class that's not worked out before, then they're really not aware of their body and space and how it's moving. So you're just going to regularly remind clients that we all have different body sizes, fitness levels, we have different amounts of energy, and that you're there to help them modify and be successful. And then of course, you always want to motivate your participants by using specific praises and having a sense of humor. And then resistance training, just a couple of points here. And benefits, listen, we know how important it is for everyone because it helps reduce risk factors associated with many diseases and physical ailments. It helps improve functional capacity. It's just, those ADLs, I keep going back to those, helping them, you can see, getting up and out of a chair. It reduces their risks of falls. And so some design considerations are here. You want to make sure that you talk to them a lot about recovery and the recovery time. If they've not worked out before, you're going to talk about maybe they might have some muscle soreness and what that may look like and feel like and how they can handle that. You want to make sure that you are including variation, all the principles, progressive overload, spasticity, and recovery that we talked about. You're going to want to make sure too that you're always going back and assessing again, and you really want to make sure that you're looking at those functional abilities, those 2 assessment tools that we talked about, and also talking to them on a regular basis about if there are any medication changes. And so we want to make sure that we create resistance training that is specific to them, and talk to them about how resistance training will help them reach their goals. I told you about my mother-in-law, and she, of course, was in the mindset that all she needed to do was walk. And to get her into resistance training, she didn't see why she needed to do that until, my husband and I told her about all the different benefits. It took some while. Now she does work out some, and maybe she'll start doing the resistance training. We'll see. And then functional training. This is performing exercises that train muscles in a coordinated, multiplanar movement patterns. It's going to require those consistent changes in the base of support. It's going to help them improve that muscle balance we talked about. And you just really want to create training that's going to carry over to those real life situations. Functional resistance training, you're going to put them in a variety of body positions, a variety of surfaces. You're going to use a lot of different resistance devices like resistant bands, maybe some weighted balls. But that functional training is going to promote that core stability, that functional capacity. We just want to make sure that we're helping them lead a happy, healthy life. And so, like I said before, I went through this very quickly, just touching on just a few of the items that the Senior Fitness Specialist certification will cover. It's an online course through WITS. You actually get 24 contact hours if you take this course, and it's an ebook. The ebook that they use, as I said before, is Physical Activity Instruction of Older Adults. It's the 2nd edition. It's a fantastic course, and so I hope each one of you that are interested in learning more of the do's and the don'ts of senior fitness will sign up for this course on the WITS website. And so I feel like I blew through that very quickly. So much more I would have liked to have gone over, but like I said, you can take the course. So I know we have just a couple of minutes. Are there any questions or anybody has?
There are, and we only have like 5 minutes, so I'm going to go through the 1 or 2 that I can see quickly. Anne, you had a question about what book the table comes from. It's the one that she just had on the slide.
Right. All that
in the course.
The tables, everything came from that book.
A couple people asked, so I'm just going to go what ADL stands for.
ADL is activity of daily living, and you might see it as BADL, and that's basic activities of daily living.
All right. Patricia wants to know regarding the exercise testing, ACSM guidelines for testing and prescription for older adults don't or may not require a test unless indicated by a physician or healthcare provider. Then in the older population who show mobility limitations or one or more chronic medical conditions, the test may not be applicable at all. What are your thoughts on that?
Whoa, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Once again, and I always go back to it, you are the one that is sitting face to face with that individual. You're doing the pre-screening. You're talking to their physician. And so that is something that then you would have to make that call. If you're working in a gym and you have questions, then you might want to talk to your manager. But really it comes down to that pre-exercise screening, the PAR-Q, the HHQ, and talking to the physician. A lot of times if I'm not sure, I've sent letters or emails to the physician through the client and asked and shown them, and then they can come back with yay or nay, of what's best or most appropriate for that client. It's, it always comes down to making that decision. Did that answer the
I hope so.
question?
Let's see here. Everybody who was losing connectivity during the presentation, just so you know, in about 3 hours, you'll get an email directly to the email address that you entered when joining the presentation with the copy of the recording. We can't send out the PowerPoints or anything like that, but you will get a copy of the recording. Those who are viewing the presentation will also get the quiz. Those who are just listening, unfortunately, it did not mark you as attending, and you will not get the quiz, which is why we put on there it's so important that you click on it and view everything, because we have no way of resending that out. So just so everybody knows, there was a couple questions about getting recordings and things like that. Charles said, oh, can you put the slide back up with the name of the book? I have a couple people asking for that again as well.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Charles said he's utilized different modes of training with one-on-one and group exercise. What is your take on higher intensity training in some Tabata, of course, with modifications given to every person
You know,
and watching what they're doing?
and once again, I fall back to that same thing. You have done the pre-exercise, you've done the performance assessment, you are there with them. And so, my dad, like, no, he would be fine. He's 85, and that man goes kayaking and hiking. My mother-in-law, maybe really modified. So, you know, I just keep falling back to you as the fitness professional doing the pre-exercise screening, getting the medical clearance, doing the performance assessments, making sure that even on that day, you're asking them, how do you feel? Because you have to pay attention to their medications. Did they get sleep? How are they feeling? And if that would be appropriate for them.
All right. Let's see here. Virginia wants to know, are there any particular suggestions for telephone exercise classes for those who are truly homebound? Can't do home training these days.
So do they, if they have any capability of, FaceTime, Zoom, any type of that, that's great. If not, so, oh my gosh, I laugh. I started training before internet and any phones or anything. And so I would revert to old, printouts of exercises if I couldn't be with them or if the client was going away, and allowing them to get a workout that way.
All right. So there's one more question. I know you have to go because you have another presentation. Lindsay wants to know any tips for dealing with a client with arthritis, or what are the best tips for dealing with a client with arthritis?
And so, one of the things that you do want to talk to them about, research shows, and this class will fall back on that, that actually exercise and flexibility and all of this actually helps with some of those arthritis symptoms. And so to educate them and show them some research on that, I'm a big fan of, hey, look, according to so-and-so, these studies show that it actually helps. And then just once again, it's communication with them and saying, okay, well, how does this feel? How did it feel the day after, 2 days after? And and I take copious notes on their workouts, like, okay, I did this exercise. How did you feel during? How'd you feel the next day? And then that's going to help you program the best for that individual. But just educating them on that exercise has actually been shown to be beneficial for those with those arthritis symptoms.
All right. So that is going to conclude the presentation today. I thank everybody for coming and joining us live during the presentation. Again, the recording for those that attended live will come in 3 hours along with the quiz. You have until Tuesday on the 26th to get it done. Normally it's Monday, but we're not in the office, or I'm not logging in on Monday due to Memorial Day. So you'll have until 8 a.m. Eastern time to complete that. I would really just do it before the weekend so you don't forget. Um, so get that done. Make sure you're checking your junk or spam folder because we can't resend that email. Those that are only listening, you'll only get the recording because you have to actually click on that link in order to show that you've attended to get the quiz. And if you have any questions, you can shoot us an email, and I'm going to go ahead and let you lead us out, Martha.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone's doing well, and hope you guys sign up for this course. It's a fantastic course. Take care, everybody.